Well, it will be at least 4 weeks until the House of Commons votes on Theresa May's Brexit deal. The Prime Minister confirmed that the debate on her deal will restart when MPs return to Westminster after their Christmas break. The Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, accused the Prime Minister of wasting time. In protest, in the last hour, he put down a motion of no confidence in the Prime Minister as an individual, but it's unclear tonight when that vote might be held and how it might threaten the survival of the government. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, joins us now from Westminster. Gary, could you tell us what's going on?
The vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister that Jeremy Corbyn has gone for is not the sort of full constitutional bazooka that you can use. A vote of no confidence in the government, that's written into law. There's very clear wording you can use if you want to press that button, and it allows you a vote which the government must make sure there is time for, usually the very next day, so it could have been a very exciting moment, and it can bring down a government. Jeremy Corbyn has not pressed that button. People around him say it's because he only wants to press it when he thinks he can win, and so he obviously doesn't think the numbers are there for him at the moment. But he wants to look like he's keeping up the pressure on the government and not just sitting around. Labour MPs, some of them, those who are pro a second referendum, think the reason he hasn't pressed the big bazooka button is because he's terrified if he were to do that and were to lose that vote, the option of a general election would have gone off the table, and he would then have to focus on what the Labour Party conference said would be the second option, the second referendum idea, and he doesn't really want to go there. All this is happening on a day when the cabinet splits were in full display, lots of potential to turn the guns on the government over that. Labour didn't really pull that off today, I think it's fair to say, but they hope they've raised the temperature a bit. The temperature will be raised tomorrow in cabinet. It's a cabinet that looks like it's going to be a very heated, scratchy affair indeed, with the different factions emerging. Meanwhile, we don't know whether Jeremy Corbyn's going to get that vote this week. The government is saying they probably won't give him time for it. It might have to wait till January. He might have very slightly, if not shot himself in the foot, grazed himself a little bit today. Here's how the day went. Theresa May stands accused of playing for time. Today, she gave herself until the third week in January to have the vote on her deal. She cancelled last week.
Today, they've been dragged kicking and screaming to announce a date to restart the debate.
Theresa May knew she'd seen off his plan to call a vote of no confidence in her if she hadn't named the date. She also tried to bat away the Labour leader's other claims.
Speaker, the right honourable gentleman asked me 3 questions during that response. Does the deal still have the confidence of the Cabinet? Yes. Does Cabinet collective responsibility still apply? Yes. Does the Cabinet want to avoid no deal? Yes, the Cabinet wants to ensure that we leave the European Union with a good deal, and that is this deal.
In fact, there are at least 3 factions in Cabinet, and they're openly pushing different strategies for Brexit. The No to No Deal faction, including Philip Hammond, Greg Clark, Amber Rudd, David Gauke, dead set against no deal, thinking the time has come to see what other solutions get a majority in the Commons.
We need to find out where the will of Parliament is, where the majority of MPs will vote in Parliament, and nothing should be off the table. We should consider all options.
We all should consider each of the alternatives and set out what kind of deal Parliament is willing to pass, rather than simply criticising the proposal that the Prime Minister has brought.
The No Deal Isn't So Bad group includes Andrea Leadsom, Penny Mordaunt and, surprisingly to some, Jeremy Hunt.
We have to deliver on Brexit, and that means we can't come up with something else in Parliament. We have to deliver on that result.
The Theresa May's deal is the only game in town faction, might even be in a minority in Cabinet.
I think the Prime Minister clearly, as you would understand, is determined to stick with it and try and get the deal through.
There are many people in Cabinet who still share that belief.
Increasingly, there are other people thinking, right, OK, let's assume for a moment that's not going to happen. What are the alternatives?
She's in a minority Cabinet, not just a minority government.
Well, I think that she is determined to get the deal through. I think most people around the Cabinet table are beginning to jockey to think about what the alternatives are.
It is important for Parliament, but also for the government, for all of us to be thinking about what happens next at this critical time.
And you're saying Cabinet ministers, some of them, are already doing that big time.
Yeah, cabinet ministers are, and I think in the absence of a big, open, comprehensive offer from Number 10 to Parliament, ministers are taking it upon themselves to put the feelers out, figure out what the lie of the land is, where different MPs are, and I think that is doing their job in the current circumstances.
Back in the Commons, the Prime Minister's promise of a vote in 4 weeks' time on her deal didn't appear to be shifting opinion in her direction.
Does she not think it would be wiser to seek an extension to Article 50? To seek an extension to Article 50 rather than to leave with no deal?
Please do think again in holding this vote, in holding a series of standalone resolutions which mean that we can take a view and move on.
As others have said, on Thursday it will be 100 days until Britain leaves the European Union. At the moment we have no deal and no plan B.
Yep.
This is a constitutional crisis because this House is not being allowed to express its will.
The Prime Minister, under her breath, disagreed.
So can I say to the Prime Minister...
At the end of the session, Jeremy Corbyn stood up again. He'd decided, after all, he wanted to table a motion of no confidence in the Prime Minister, a plan that had been briefed out, dropped, and was now revived in the space of a couple of hours.
So, Mr. Speaker, as the only way I can think of ensuring a vote takes place this week, I am about to table a motion which says the following: that this House has no confidence in the Prime Minister due to her failure to allow the House of Commons to have a meaningful vote straight away on the withdrawal agreement and framework for future relationships between the UK and the European Union. And that will be tabled immediately, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Theresa May then left the Commons. Her team insists the 4 weeks they want before a vote is to get reassurances from Brussels. Labour's chief whip told Labour MPs if the government doesn't give time for that motion to be debated this week, Labour has secret plans to escalate its parliamentary warfare. Ambush is one of the main weapons in such guerrilla attacks, but today the Labour leadership slightly ambushed itself.
Gary Gibbon. Well, now we're joined for Labour by the Shadow International Trade Secretary Barry Gardner. Barry Gardner, at the sort of very 11th hour, Mr Corbyn has called this motion of no confidence in the Prime Minister. Where's that going to get you?
Well, look, the Prime Minister last week, as you know, called off the vote, which was supposed to be tabled on Tuesday of last week. That was a meaningful vote that we had worked very hard to secure and ultimately forced the Prime Minister into conceding. Now she called that off, saying that she was going to go to Europe, to the Council at the weekend, speak to the European leaders and bring back greater assurances that would pacify some of those on her own backbenches who were still saying that they would not support the deal.
Fine.
In the hope
all
that she could
that
get it
is
through.
well known to our viewers. The big issue is you've now called in a no confidence motion on her, and there is no prospect of it being heard before the meaningful vote.
Well, we have called a vote of no confidence in her. We've not tabled a vote of no confidence in the government. And it's about escalating pressure incrementally on the Prime Minister.
But when is that vote going to be heard?
Well, that's now a matter for the government to allow time, parliamentary time for that to be tabled.
There's no way they're going to offer you time for that.
What we do know is that last week, in the Conservative Party's own vote of confidence in the Prime Minister, 117 of them said they had no confidence in her continuing as their leader either. And therefore it's fairly clear, and the mood of the House was very clear today.
Yeah, but forgive me, I want to know when you're going to table this, because you have no more days that are allocated to Labour. There is no prospect of you being able to do this unless the government itself agrees to let you have such a motion.
Look, what you're pointing out, as if it's my fault, is that we are in opposition, that we don't control the business of the House. That much is self-evident. What we can do is we can seek to bring the maximum pressure to bear incrementally on this Prime Minister and on this government. That's what we're trying to do. We believe it's an outrage that not only did she cancel the meaningful vote last week, but that having said she was going to Europe to get a better deal, she came back with nothing and then still did not allow the vote to go ahead this week.
A last question to you.
That's why we put this pressure on her today. We then secured a date, but the date is so far in the future as basically to hold Parliament Parliament and the country to ransom by saying it will be so far down the line, and of course in the meantime, business is losing money, business is greater uncertainty.
Mr. Gardner, I've got one last question to ask you. One last question. The only fertile opposition that is really being active in this is from the Conservative Party itself. Labour has really been asleep on this job.
Well, look, for a start, that wasn't a question, was it? It was actually a statement of your view, John. But actually, it's not correct. Because we are the people in the Labour Party who have consistently ensured that the government, against its wishes, had to bring things to the House of Commons, whether it was the triggering of Article 50 by a vote in the Commons in the first place, whether it was the impact assessments, whether it was the financial statements, whether it was the legal advice, all of these, and finally the meaningful vote, all of these were things that we insisted upon against the government, and finally they conceded. Today, what we did do is we secured a date, albeit not the date soon enough, far too far in the future, that the Prime Minister has said will be the date when she brings back a meaningful vote to Parliament.
Thank you very much.
Her behaviour has been disgraceful, and we will continue to hold her to account.
Thank you very much, Barry Gardner. Well, now we're joined by the Conservative MP, Justine Greening, who is in favour of a people's vote. But you declared in the House of Commons today that we are in the midst of a constitutional crisis. Is that for real?
Yes, and I think the politics has got to stop. You just heard from Barry Gardner, and I think anyone listening to that will understand how shambolic a position that Labour is in. Three things now need to happen. Firstly, the Commons needs to be able to have a vote on the Prime Minister's deal. It will not change substantially. We now need to represent our constituents. I believe that vote will be lost. Secondly...
just one moment, let's clarify that one, because she's promised a vote on the 14th of January. That's not good enough for you.
No, it will waste a month that Britain does not have. On Thursday, it's 100 days before we leave the European Union with no deal. The second thing that needs to happen is after that vote is voted down, we then need to, as a Parliament, explore the other options. Of course, one of those is the second referendum. I accept that there are other options that parliamentarians are putting on the table. They should all be debated. Thirdly, if Parliament cannot find a route through on the other substantive options on Brexit, whether it's a Norway-style relationship or whether it's a Canada-style relationship, then it de facto means that we have to go back to the people. That's where I've always felt we will end up. I think Parliament is in gridlock. But we have to now face reality, and what Britain needs is its leaders and Parliament to step up to the plate and start taking decisions. We have been going around in circles now for 2.5 years. That has to stop. The clock is ticking on Brexit. I'm afraid that MPs and leaders, whether on the Conservative or the Labour side, now need to start working together to find a route through.
Justine Greening, we are 100 days away from the 29th of March. There appears tonight to be no prospect of achieving anything that is radically different from either a no-deal crash-out or the Prime Minister's deal. It's going to be one or the other. She's not going to improve on the deal, as you have said. So where are we?
Of course, neither of those are acceptable to the British public. Around 15% of people are in support of the Prime Minister's deal. Overwhelmingly, people and businesses, of course, do not want a no deal. That is why I believe the only route through this is eventually to have to go back to people, because Parliament can't find its consensus. So
and what do you say to your constituents who are going to bang on your door and say, I've voted already, I do not want my vote questioned, I voted the way I wanted to, and that's the end of it. Don't ask me again.
Well, of course, I regret that Parliament hasn't been able to work a way through Brexit. The problem has been that the plan the Prime Minister's brought forward on leaving the European Union is not what those people who voted for leaving the European Union wanted, and therefore Parliament has begun debating that. But the point is, we have to find a direction. There are a whole load of other issues facing our country which now need urgent attention, whether it's social mobility, whether it's housing, anything else. All of this is on hold until we get through finding a route forward on Brexit. That is now imperative, and the clock is ticking down, and Parliament and ministers need to take some decisions.
We shall be dealing with some of those issues that she raised just now about what is not being done. And joining me now from Westminster is Education Minister Nadhim Zahawi. Mr. Zahawi, where do you think we are tonight?
Well, I think the Prime Minister was clear today that she will bring back the meaningful vote as soon as Parliament returns on the 7th of January, and that negotiations continue on the one part of her agreement on the withdrawal, which clearly caused colleagues concern, which is this backstop issue.
And with whom will those negotiations continue? Because the people in Europe, the other 27, have said no further negotiations, none, and repeated it when she went there last week.
Well, she's made it very clear to them that the issue of the backstop has to be dealt with. They have, in their communiqué, taken some strides forward, not enough, as she quite rightly pointed out. And what she's saying, she is the Prime Minister of our country, is that she's continuing to talk to the European leaders and, of course, will bring back the agreement. And I think the bulk of the withdrawal agreement,
we'll bring back
we can all agree on.
What makes you so sure that they are going to change their mind on the backstop? There is no prospect of that at all. There's no indication from anybody publicly. There are 27 of them and one of her.
Well, let's wait and see what returns. I think it would be wrong to undermine those discussions. I think it's right to wait and see what is that final legal reassurance that we seek on the backstop, so that it can be, temporary. They've said some good things about it, that it is temporary, that this would not be their preferred option, but the Prime Minister is pushing a little harder on this, and I think it's only right that we all back her on this to get the best withdrawal agreement possible. And what she reminded the House today is whichever option the House then favours, you still need a withdrawal agreement in place.
Well, but when she comes back, and when you come back from 2 weeks long holiday, you will have 70 days until the moment that we leave the European Union. This is a ghastly position to have put this country into, and you have done it.
Well, first of all, MPs return to their constituencies and still do work. They will take, I'm sure, time off for Christmas and New Year. So I wouldn't characterise it the way you characterise it, John, but that's by the by.
Well, you're not in Parliament to collectively make decisions on the country's future and Europe.
But the
70 days.
But
70 days.
The government continues to work hard during that period to make sure that the withdrawal agreement that comes back does reassure colleagues. And I think you'll find that the bulk of colleagues, without the backstop, can actually agree. There is a majority in the House for the withdrawal agreement if we can get reassurance on the backstop. You had some senior sort of leaders of the Brexit part of Parliament saying, actually, it's the backstop that's the problem. They need it sorting. And if that can be sorted, we can agree on this deal. We can come together and agree on this. As for Labour's shenanigans tonight...
hang on. Let me get you on this. One final agreement, one final question. And that is the question to what extent you think you can really do anything in time for the 29th of March. The truth is you're going to have to push Article 50 back. Do you accept that?
No, I don't accept that, because we've got the 21st of January as our deadline for Theresa May's withdrawal agreement, which I think the Parliament can come together and support if we deal with the issue of the backstop.
Have you ever seen Parliament more divided than you're in right now? Have you?
Well, all I would say to you is if you look at the bulk of the agreement, I've spoken to many, many colleagues on this, they will agree that actually what Theresa May's negotiated is good, other than the concern about the backstop. And if she can deal with the backstop, and I think she's doing her best to do that, then we can come together and vote for that withdrawal agreement. We will need a withdrawal agreement no matter what we want the relationship to be beyond that.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us.